Exotics in Destiny are extremely powerful all by themselves, but when you combine certain exotics together, they can create insane combos that completely change how you play the game. With stuff like Nova Bombs that deal 1.4 million damage, melees that one-shot everything and create huge explosions, and even a setup that gives you 91% damage resistance, the exotic combinations here are absolutely insane. We created this video with the goal of finding the best combos available, and in order to do that, we tested and experimented with tons of different exotics and researched all around the community. The result was we found some great combos of regular exotics and armor, but also some really notable ones involving the special class items that allow you to combine multiple exotics together and use them at the same time. These combos will undoubtedly change the way that you play Destiny, so sit back, relax, and help us reach our goal of 100,000 subscribers on the second channel if you're not yet subscribed. A ridiculously good combo to start us off involves the Hunter class item with Spirit of Caliban. Essentially how it works is your melees will ignite and take out large crowds of enemies, and this is best achieved by combining Gambler's Dodge and Combination Blow. These two abilities will recharge each other, so basically the gameplay loop is just dodge, punch for a big explosion, dodge again, punch again, and just do that forever until all of the enemies are gone. If you manage to get Spirit of the Liar in the other slot, this will give you extremely strong melees to enhance the setup even further. This synergy is so powerful because not only will you be dealing more damage with your melee to get that final blow, but then when you do the final blow, it will actually trigger the big explosion and wipe out everything nearby. If you don't get Spirit of the Liar though, another contender you might want to consider is Syntheseps. This will give you a large melee damage bonus when you're surrounded, and thus you'll be able to achieve very similar results. Syntheseps are quite good with this combo, but they actually were so good that Bungie had to limit its damage to prevent it from being too insane. So therefore, it will actually only buff your combination blow damage by an extra 30%. You might know that certain things can summon these little turrets that fire at enemies, but you can actually summon 4 of these at the same time, and they're so powerful you can basically just go AFK and let them do all the work for you. You'll need the Getaway Artist Gauntlets, the No Time to Explain Pulse Rifle, and the aspects called Hellion and Bleak Watcher. All you have to do is use your Pulse Rifle, consume a grenade, and finally activate your Rift or Phoenix Dive to summon all 4 of the turrets at the same time. Osteostriga, Thorn, Necrochasm, and Touch of Malice are a special classification of weapon known as Weapon of Sorrow in the lore. This means they have special synergies and hidden perks that can be rather powerful. Pairing any of these weapons with the Warlock Gauntlet called Necrotic Grip will give them the special feature of creating poisonous explosions that deal damage over time. You might be thinking that Osteostriga already does that, and you'd be right, but the difference is that the final blows from the poison will just continue chaining and creating even more explosions when you're using this combo. Necrochasm also has a unique interaction because normally you need to get a headshot to trigger its explosion, but now you can actually just get a body shot and still get explosions if the target has been poisoned. Touch of Malice will only get the poison effect from its blight though, so this is probably the weakest of the 4 options. This next exotic combo lets you deal literally 1.4 million damage with a single Nova Bomb. But first, the most observant of you may have noticed that I've included a few Star Trek references in my content over the past few years. I'm a huge fan of the Star Trek universe, and therefore I am happy to say that this video is sponsored by Star Trek Fleet Command. In this game, you can recruit more than 100 characters from over 50 years of Star Trek stories and venture off on missions into the final frontier. Based on the stories and lore from the shows, they also update the game with new missions every month to keep things fresh and interesting. This is a 4X MMO, meaning that the core gameplay elements involve exploring, expanding, exploiting, and exterminating. Therefore, you'll find yourself engaging with other players, conquering territories, customizing your fleet, and forging alliances. There are tons of starships that you can collect and add to your fleet, and for example, this month you can get the insane Gorn Eviscerator. Join the millions of players experiencing this galactic journey and boldly go where no one has gone before. Download Star Trek Fleet Command for free right now with my link in the description and reach level 5 to support the channel. If you're like me and you enjoy sci-fi settings like Destiny and Star Trek, you're going to love this game, so check it out down below, and now let's get back to our video. Over the past few years, Warlocks have often been relegated to using Well of Radiance for nearly every raid and dungeon encounter. When you consider the Well of Radiance nerf and combine that with the new options presented by the class item though, there are now actually some solid contenders other than just exclusively using Well of Radiance. Warlocks can get Spirit of the Star Eater on their exotic bonds, and therefore charge up their super by picking up Orbs of Power. When you combine this with the Dominance Fragment and a Vortex Grenade, you can weaken targets, and then your Nova Bomb will deal nearly 900,000 damage even without any Void Surges or artifact mods. If Void Surge is active though, you can get the super damage up to a ridiculous 1.1 million. It's kind of crazy, but that's not even the end of it, because if you make use of the Expanding Abyss artifact perk and the Facet of Courage fragment to get even more damage, you can get the Nova Bomb to do 1.4 million damage when Void Surge is active. That is an absurd amount of damage for just a one-off super, and while it does take a little bit of effort to set it up properly, it is absolutely worth it. That build on its own is very good, but so far we have only mentioned one perk on the exotic class item. If you combine all of the stuff we just mentioned with Apotheosis, we can actually take it even further. With this setup in full swing, you basically won't even need to use your weapons because your abilities will just become your main damage rotation. You'll want to use the Courage Fragment and make sure you have Arcane Needles and the Arc Storm Grenade equipped. You'll start your rotation with an Arcane Needle to debuff the target, then throw your Nova Bomb, and then Apotheosis will kick in and you can constantly spam between throwing Arcane Needles to debuff the target and the Arc Storm Grenade. In one of my previous videos, I made a joke about how Izanagi's Burden basically feels like a Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun, but now we actually have a true Golden Gun sniper combo and it is incredible. The Still Hunt is an extremely high damage sniper that you can turn into a temporary Golden Gun, allowing it to do even more insane damage. However, this does synergize with the Celestial Nighthawk exotic, making it just fire a single Golden Gun shot that deals even more damage. When you use the real Golden Gun super at the same time, this combo just lets you output two absurdly high damage shots back to back, and this is by far the greatest damage combo for most encounters in the current state of the game. This is an insane DPS combo, but what if you're just looking for something that tears through crowds of enemies for a more normal activity? You can create what is essentially a infinite threadling build on your Warlock if you use your Warlock Bond to combine Spirit of the Swarm and Spirit of Inmost Light. Inmost Light will just work passively in the background and allow you to keep your melee, grenade, and class abilities up as much as possible. On the Prismatic build, we want to be using Phoenix Dive with Arcane Needles, Threadling Grenade, and Weaver's Call. Arcane Needles makes it easy to create tangles because they unravel targets, and then you can either pick up the tangles or otherwise destroy them to create even more Threadlings. Normally, Le Monarch will only create its poison if you have a perfect draw, and this can be problematic and make it difficult to pull off. However, if you pair it with the Oathkeeper exotic, it automatically makes all of your draws perfect, and therefore it will apply the poison every single time no matter what. If you're a hunter who wants to stack massive damage resistance with a single grenade, then you'll probably love the combo of Spirit of Renewal with Spirit of the Seared Arachne. With this build, you'll need to equip the Duskfield Grenade, and then things simply get crazy. First off, when you throw the grenade, you will instantly get Woven Mail and have increased damage resistance. Then, if you also go and stand inside of the grenade you just threw, you will also get Frost Armor, and this can stack up to 5 times. You'll also have the added benefit of giving your teammates Frost Armor, and also reducing the outgoing damage of any enemies who might step in your Duskfield. Before any other build crafting, this totals to 78.7% damage resist, but if you add stuff like 100 Resilience, Facet of Protection, and Resist mods, your total damage resistance will come in at a ridiculous 91.1%. This is for enemies that are standing in your Duskfield, but even when they aren't, you'll still have a crazy high 82.3% damage resistance. Final blows with the Lumina hand cannon leave behind these noble rounds on the ground, and then you can pick them up and fire them at your teammates to gain a damage buff and heal you. If you pair your Lumina with Boots of the Assembler though, this combo lets you fire off noble rounds without even getting a final blow. When you stand in a rift, not only will you get these little seekers flying off to buff your teammates, but you will also passively get noble rounds loaded into your Lumina. Additionally, this combo is definitely something that Bungie wanted us to use, so they decided to give Lumina plus 30 airborne effectiveness when the boots are equipped. Actium War Rig will steadily reload all of your LMGs and autos at all times, and there are a couple exotic pairings that stand out here. This video would not be complete if I didn't mention the classic Sweet Business combo that just lets you unleash a nearly endless rain of bullets on your opponents. Exotic LMGs like Xenophage, Thunderlord, and Grand Overture also make great pairings here because they will have so much ammo that they will basically never require a manual reload. A great Devour combo involves Spirit of Osmiomancy paired with the Spirit of Verity. The Osmiomancy perk says that your grenades recharge quicker on hits, and the Seeker spawn from Cold Snap travels further. Unlike the original gauntlets though, you don't actually need to use Cold Snap grenades with this combo. You can use literally any other grenade, and one of my favorites is the Vortex Grenade. These not only do a good job of taking out crowds of enemies, but they also have the added benefit of pulling enemies in and making them stationary so they're super easy to hit. You'll want to pair this with the Feed the Void so that your kills will give you Devour, and then also Facet of Bravery so that your Void weapons will gain volatile rounds. These weapons can then be used to defeat enemies, which will then activate the Spirit of Verity to buff your grenade damage, making it easier to get more grenade final blows and repeat the cycle. Don't forget that getting final blows with Devour also increases the grenade recharge rate, so this stacked with Osmiomancy can help you very quickly get your grenade back, which can restart the cycle if the Devour ever expires. If you prime an enemy with the hipfire of Tiku's Divination, it will then create a big explosion when they eventually die. However, you can actually make these dying enemies explode twice if you also decide to equip the Severance Enclosure exotic at the same time. This chess piece causes explosions on any melee final blows, so if you simply prime the target with the bow and then defeat them with a melee like a throwing hammer, the double explosion will take out a lot of surrounding enemies. Titans are mostly known for punching things and not exactly being super stealthy, but if you combine Spirit of the Assassin with Spirit of the Contact on your Titan mark, you can then become stealthy and also still pack a punch. Spirit of the Assassin will allow your Titan to go invisible whenever you either do a finisher or get a powered melee final blow. On top of that, Spirit of Contact will then cause any surviving nearby enemies to be struck with lightning and jolted, making it extremely easy to re-proc Spirit of the Assassin and go invisible over and over. The Lucky Pants exotic can give your hand cannons a stacking damage bonus after each hit, and this can turn them into surprisingly good damage options for large enemies or even bosses. In particular, Lucky Pants pairs extremely well with Malfeasance. Not only does it fire fast and create explosions, but it also has Vorpal Weapon and a Taken buff that all contribute to it dealing massive damage. If a Fireteam member is using the Witherhoard exotic, this also triggers a unique interaction that gives you even more damage with your Malfeasance, so the potential here is extremely high. It's also worth noting that the Lucky Pants can be a great exotic combo for other hand cannons too, so feel free to experiment until you find your favorite. Despite the continuous nerfs over the past few years, Divinity is still an amazing exotic, and it can be enhanced even further thanks to Cenotaph Mask. This will steadily reload your trace rifle over time to make sure you don't run out of ammo in the mag, and therefore it ensures that you'll be able to continuously damage enemies and keep them debuffed. Cenotaph will also mark targets, and when an ally defeats them, it will give you special ammo and it will give all of your allies heavy ammo. This is easily one of the most powerful support roles in the entire game, and your teammates will greatly appreciate the nearly infinite heavy ammo and massive crit spots on all of the enemies. A great grenade buffing combo is Spirit of the Bear with Spirit of Verity. Spirit of the Bear improves the new Titan aspect, Unbreakable. At its base level, this aspect gives you a small void shield that can be used to block incoming damage, which drains your grenade, but also gives you an overshield. When you release that shield or run out of grenade energy, it will unleash a frontal blast based on how much damage was blocked. Spirit of the Bear does a couple important things that can synergize here. First of all, it improves your movement speed while blocking with the shield, but also it takes any damage that is blocked and converts it into super energy. When Spirit of Verity is then introduced, it gives a stacking grenade damage bonus that further improves the damage of the blast, and I've seen damage numbers of over 300,000 using this combo. That number is so high that it's borderline competing with actual supers in terms of raw damage output. The Exderis grenade launcher was quite underwhelming when it first released, but following a buff and a unique exotic interaction, it has now become significantly more interesting. The Exderis will create moths that go seek out and explode when they encounter an enemy, but you can also get multiple of these moths thanks to the Moth Keeper's exotic gauntlets. These will replace your grenade with a cage of moths that will explode and unleash even more moths, and these can be used to seek out enemies for damage or seek out your allies to give you an overshield. The unique exotic interaction, though, is the most interesting part because it causes your final blows with Exderis to spawn 2 moths, and there will be 1 of each type. The first will go and explode on a nearby enemy, and then the second will come back and give you an overshield. Between the 2 of these effects and the army of moths on your side, this combo can be great for a variety of PvE content. With the previous nerf of the Star Eater scales, this exotic could really benefit from adding some super synergy to get the super more often. If you get this perk on your exotic cloak and then pair it with Spirit of Galanor, you can do just that. Spirit of Galanor will return super energy from any hits or final blows from using your super, and unlike the original Shards of Galanor exotic, you can actually use this with any Hunter super. So basically, you just use your super, get a chunk of the energy back, and then use any extra orbs to supercharge your next super and do even more damage. However, all of this doesn't necessarily make it the best option for boss damage. The best use case for this is probably for taking out beefy adds, and you can also use a roaming super like Silk Strike to give it extremely high uptime and damage. If you're just looking for the pure boss damage, your best bet will probably still be Celestial Nighthawk, as it is unmatched for hunter damage at the moment. Helm of Saint 14 gives you a damage boost and blinds anyone who enters your bubble, but this effect actually isn't just limited to the super bubble. This effect also applies itself to the Edge of Action glaive and the little bubble that it can create, making it significantly more powerful, especially in PvP. Precious Scars will give you a healing restoration buff, but what really kicks this exotic into overdrive is pairing it with a solar subclass and a solar weapon like Sunshot. Ordinarily, the restoration isn't super strong and only lasts for a couple seconds, but paired with Ember of Solace, this increases it to 8 seconds. With the exotic refreshing the healing on every final blow, this will give you effectively infinite healing and make it so that you can stay alive really easily as long as you continue to land final blows with your solar weapon like Sunshot. Two perks on the Titan mark work really well together for buffing your barricade class ability. Spirit of Abeyant improves the Dranger's Lash aspect, and this sends strand projectiles towards targets to suspend them and damage them on impact. The exotic perk improves them by slightly increasing the range that the projectiles go, while also improving the tracking so that they are more likely to hit their targets. As you can see right here, without the mark, the projectile will go right between these two Vex, but with the perk equipped, it will manage to make contact. You can then bring in Spirit of Alpha Lupi that will work to restore a chunk of health when the barricade is deployed. This can be particularly useful if you're deploying a towering barricade in tricky situations. You don't get the woven mail that the traditional Abeyant Leap provides, but if you are panic popping with the barricade, the immediate healing may be more helpful in the short term. Our next Titan class item combo is Spirit of the Star Eaters with Spirit of the Eternal Warrior. In this case, you'll want to use the final shape Void super called Twilight Arsenal. This super does a ton of damage, but also when the initial attack ends, the remaining axes can be used for further damage by you or your teammates. If you're watching this during episode Echoes, the current artifact perk Expanding Abyss also buffs your void damage against weakened opponents. After taking the initial damage bonus from your super provided by the Star Eaters and then you go pick up the axes, you will now have the benefit of increased weapon damage because you are using a void weapon. This will be particularly great in any activity that features a Void Surge, and it gives Titans a nice damage option to contrast the traditionally defensive Void supers. Rat King grants invisibility when you reload, and this is rather basic, but it can get a little bit more interesting if you pair it with a certain hunter exotic. The Graviton Forfeit will interact with the invisibility to give you a few extra seconds and recharge your abilities, and if you do it correctly, you can actually stay invisible indefinitely. Another interesting hunter combo is Spirit of the Assassin with Spirit of Syntheseps. It is usually very dangerous to just fly into the middle of a big crowd of enemies because most builds will stand no chance of surviving that, but in this particular combo, it is actually built for this playstyle. When you are surrounded by enemies, your melee gets a damage bonus, and then if you kill any of these enemies with a powered melee, you will go invisible and that will help you survive all of the surrounding enemies. You can then just continue with your extra high damage punches and repeated invisibility until you inevitably defeat all nearby enemies. You won't exactly get your super back very quickly with this next combo, but you do have the option of using Spirit of the Foe Tracer with Spirit of the Star Eaters and getting the benefit from buffing your weapon damage in addition to your super. You'll make use of the Star Eater bonus for your initial super, and then Foe Tracer will kick in by buffing any outgoing damage of any weapons that match your super's damage type. In the current state of the meta, if it's a Solar Surge, you're probably still going to want to use Celestial Nighthawk, but for other surges, this could be an attractive alternative. For example, if you want to use this with Tether, it can get the 70% damage bonus that Star Eaters gets at 6 stacks, and then any subsequent Void weapons that you use to DPS the boss will also be buffed by 25% from then on. Alternatively, you could also make use of this with a roaming super like Silk Strike, because then it will buff up any of your strand weapons that you might be using after the super expires. If this combo was on any other class, it would be a very obviously strong choice, but until we see a nerf to Celestial Nighthawk or Still Hunt, this probably won't get a ton of use. It does seem that a nerf to one or both of these is eventually inevitable, so this could really increase the utility of this combo down the road. Another build that would be more focused on DPS is pairing the Salvation's Edge raid exotic Euphony with an exotic bond that features the Spirit of Apotheosis and the Spirit of Star Eater. The exotic perk of Euphony is Unwound, which activates when dealing sustained damage with the weapon, and it spawns threadlings at the target's location. It also has the trait Spindle, where threadling damage increases the weapon's damage as well. The advantage here would be the increased damage that Star Eaters gives your Needlestorm super, and then it will spawn threadlings, and then finally, Apotheosis will let you spam threadling grenades while you shoot Euphony. This will give you as many threadlings as possible on the boss when you start damage, and then the weapon itself will continue to create threadlings to buff up your spindle perk and give you bonus damage. Overall, the exotic armor combo is really good for just tearing through ads, but when you pair it with a raid exotic, it can do some pretty serious damage as well. As a general note here, I think it's important to mention that any class item combo you get is probably worth keeping unless it's a duplicate. The meta in this game can swing drastically and at a moment's notice, so a different combo that isn't mentioned in this video could easily become the best option in the future. It's also important to say that although we did extensively test for this video, we've only had access to these class items for a short time. We may discover a different combo that completely blows these out of the water in the future, and it's entirely possible that the community is just overlooking something that might be a part of a future excellent build. With all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and next up I'd recommend checking out this video that covers a bunch of mistakes you might be making in Destiny 2. Liking and subscribing also helps as well, and I hope to see you over there in the next video.